Hello and welcome back to my humble show. I am your host for today and every other day, the Articulate Thinker. Hopefully. Here to bring you art, articles, and articulation straight from Articulation Station. So be sure to like, subscribe, and enjoy the ride. Don't forget to turn on those bell notifications while you're at it. If you like it, put a ring on it. Sharing is caring. All that other good stuff, but enough about me. Although I will add that I attempted to tackle this topic yesterday, this terrible topic. But I was not focused because I found out halfway through the day that I had an event to attend, a meal to attend with some old friends of mine and my wife's. But I did end up seeing a friend who I hadn't seen in 15 years. So, that's a little side note. Just know that I have been thinking about all of this and feeling insignificant when it comes to speaking on this. But yes, a lot has happened over the last few days. Forget about me. A lot has happened around the world, notably in Israel, at the hands of, Hamas and their terrorist endeavors. That's what they are. They're terrorists, and they carried out a terrorist attack, a surprise terrorist attack. Now, did that have to do with a failure of intelligence in regards to Israel and the United States even? Well, these things are all being debated right now. I was just listening to the daily White House press briefing. As you can see here on the screen. Well, actually, I was listening to it on the way home from work. I'm on my lunch break right now, so I don't have a lot of time. Just so you know. Gotta go soon. But, yeah, he is done speaking. It is still live, but Karine Jean-Pierre is speaking now. She's not going to have much insight on the matter, or on many matters for that matter. But yes, Jake Sullivan was there. And it's interesting because a couple of weeks ago he was saying that the peace in the Middle East was at like an all-time high. He was essentially gloating about the peace in the Middle East. And now, just weeks later, after a terrorist attack, and whether or not you want to equate that to 9/11, I know a lot of people are right now, but I don't like trying to equate things or compare things, even when it comes to mass casualty events and ultimately casualties of war, fatalities of war. But yeah, so do we take everything he has to say with a grain of salt? Certainly. I take everything the government has to say with a grain of salt. Biden administration as a whole right now. Speaking of Biden, Joe Biden himself did give a little bit of speech earlier today, a little while before this. He hadn't said much before that. He did come out yesterday and give an even shorter speech condemning the attacks in Israel, obviously. But as you can see here by the time of the video, 3 minutes long, so not much of a speech. But again, he did come out today and condemn them even more thoroughly, as he should, and by them I mean Hamas, of course. Though some are taking other sides. Well, the other side. So yes, here's the latest from definitely not the greatest president of our time. But he made remarks in a 10-minute time frame, 10-minute plus time frame. I'm not going to play any of that for you either. The most notable announcement I could say was that he said that there were American hostages being held in Gaza by Hamas. So we figured as much, especially considering how more than a dozen American citizens were killed initially by the terrorists in the attack by land, sea, and air. But it's not really a surprise. Still, it's news, and he broke it down without actually breaking it down. They're not revealing the numbers. Jake Sullivan isn't revealing the numbers. John Kirby isn't revealing the numbers. That's to be expected. I appreciate that Joe Biden came out and gave a speech condemning the the terrorists in the attack. But of course, some people, they have their issues with him, as do I. And his lid calling, his frequent lid calling, and his barbecue. I believe he had a barbecue of some sort the other day. After the weekend, or at the end of the weekend. So, there's that. And there's the fact that the Biden administration just recently greenlit Iran, in a sense, by swapping prisoners with him. And in addition to the prisoner swap, unfreezing $6 billion of cash being held up in South Korea. Yeah, for Iran, of course, it's supposed to be humanitarian in nature, the funding, that is. But, yeah, Iran just so happens to be the ones working with Hamas, funding them, weapons, training, planning, plotting, attacking. I don't know how direct it was, but courtesy of the Wall Street Journal and Reporting Sense, seems like they were in on it quite a bit. And they greenlit what happened. What happened was terrible. It was a terrible attack. And now the aftermath is growing because Hamas kicked a hornet's nest, essentially. And now their own people are paying because you have to eradicate them, in a sense. You gave them this much time. If you see the destruction in the Gaza Strip, you might think that Israel are the villains, but they could have done this anytime they wanted, couldn't they? And some people argue that this is what they've been doing all along. Clearly not the case, because we clearly see a difference between what the Gaza Strip looks like right now and what it has looked like. And since I'm referring to it, I guess I could pull up something to show you. All right, so this is just a random video I found on X of the destruction in Gaza. Of course, people are generally given warnings to get out of the buildings, which are used by Hamas to plan, to plot, and any number of other terroristic activities. But yes, this is something that Israel could have done all along. But they don't want this to happen. They don't want this to be the outcome. They don't want the destruction. They're not the ones chanting death to so-and-so. That would be Hamas. Not saying all Palestinians in general. Definitely not all Arabs in general. But, yeah, Hamas, they control the area. Hamas, not hummus. But, yeah. This is what their spread looks like now. Pun intended. But yes, there are many, many, many casualties, many, many fatalities of war, and it is sad. It is all sad. It sickens me to see. It sickens me to say. It's not a game. It's not some video game. This is real life. This is real death, destruction. But they kicked the hornet's nest. They kicked around and found out. And that's not to be taken lightly. That's not to be taken for granted. This is just one clip. I don't want to show you the more up-in-person clips which have gone around from this retaliatory response to back in the beginning, how it started. Well, how did it start exactly? It started like this. A sneak attack, a surprise attack on a holy day, basically. You know, the Jewish Sabbath, for one, and an additional holiday in addition to that. So it was obviously planned to surprise them, and it did. And going back to the potential for a failure of intelligence, well, it's hard to believe that there wasn't anything like that there. Maybe the governmental forces were a little bit too reliant on the Iron Dome, which has been putting in its work. If not for the Iron Dome, Israel would look like this. The Jews would be eradicated as Hamas wants them to be. You know, they are a terrorist group. They're like ISIS and so many other terrorist groups, and maybe more groups will get involved. There's talk of Hezbollah and Lebanon, all kinds of other nations coming together. Since this goes back to Iran, you know, if they directly took part in all of this, which even an indirect partaking is a direct partaking, really, because you're an accomplice. But I'm just saying, there is the potential for this to spill over into other areas, other nations, states, so on and so forth. But yeah, clearly not a lot of peace in the Middle East right now. Hopefully that changes soon. Hopefully Hamas can be eradicated without further fatalities in terms of civilians who are used as human shields by the terrorists themselves. And I keep referring to them as terrorists because that's exactly what they are. It's astounding that some people want to simp for them, people in this country, people in the government, members of the squad, for example, in the Democrat Party, want to simp for them. But yes. So many things led up to this, I suppose. Some might just chalk it up to the Biden administration's handling of foreign policy in general. I'm not going to just chalk it up to that, though. Like I said, there's the issue with the unfrozen funds, which the Biden administration assures us have not been spent yet and will not be spent in war, but rather on humanitarian efforts solely. Of course, money is fungible, and there's no way to hold them to that standard, to that script. I believe government officials in Iran have said they're going to do whatever they want to do with it. And aside from that, we fund them in other ways through lessened sanctions and reliance on them for oil because, you know, of our clean energy policies here. We outsource things to other countries and we rely on them in that sense, and we give them the upper hand on things, and it leads to things like this. I mean, between the Afghanistan withdrawal, which was botched, though our government pretends otherwise, and things as simple as the prisoner swap for Brittany Griner. I mean, we turned over an actual warlord, essentially. Someone who has been involved in actual terrorism. You know, these types of things, these types of maneuvers, prisoner swaps, they don't look good for us. They make us look weak. People take us less seriously. People around the world, governments around the world. Not that Hamas is much of a governmental body, but you know, they're the power on the ground there in Gaza, or at least they were. We'll see what happens after this. But yes, Joe Biden said that there are hostages over there, you know, of those who were not slaughtered immediately or slowly. There are hostages, and you got to get those back somehow, right? So do you negotiate? No, you can't negotiate with terrorists. But wait, you've already been doing that. Now, if you're the Biden administration, you've already been negotiating in a way that does not give you the upper hand. You've been giving sweetheart deals, not just to your own son, Hunter Biden, but to, foreign nations who do not have your best interest in mind. And it leads to things like this, as I already showed you. This could come across our border, could it not? I mean, it's a little bit different, and I don't want to claim that that's what's happening right now, but there is an invasion at our southern border. We have had an unprecedented number of terrorists being apprehended, or not, at our southern border since Biden has come into office. Jake Sullivan was asked about this in the press briefing just a little while ago. He didn't have much to say about it at all. He didn't want to talk about border policy, or lack thereof. And I've been meaning to talk about that as well. In fact, maybe I did in my previous show. I can't even remember. The continued building of wall, which is just a joke. Biden from not another foot of wall will be built under my administration to, well, we're building 20 miles of wall, but it's not because we have a choice. Give me a break. We need a wall. We need policy to make the wall matter. We need to prevent things like this from spilling over ultimately into our country. But also, we need to call it like we see it in regards to other countries. And in light of things like this, messages like this by organizations such as BLM, Black Lives Matter, who say they stand with Palestine. Okay, so they support, as Julio Rosas points out, specifically in regards to the Chicago chapter of BLM, they support Palestinians, or shall I say Hamas, going illegally across the border. Well, no surprise that they're okay with people going illegally across borders, except for the colonial, time people, the white people who originally colonized our land here in America. Now, they're opposed to that, but anytime someone else goes illegally across the border, they're fine with it. As they are with, with Hamas. Going by land, by sea, by air, by killing, by raping, kidnapping, holding hostage, all of that and then some. Innocent civilians who, they support on one side, but apparently not on the other. Now, it could be that more Palestinians have died or will die than Israelis. But as I pointed out, only one side is celebrating the death. And apparently, BLM wants to be a part of that. Let me pause this again. All right, here's the main website for Black Lives Matter. Fortunately, they have not put up a press release in favor of Palestine as of now. But, what you know. A member of the squad is listed in the very first thing I see because they're all about that life. And if they're picking a side here, as is the Chicago sector at least, I would assume it's the side of Hamas even. But I don't know. I don't want to speculate too much on that. I just know where they typically lean on these issues. They see someone whom they consider to be a minority, and they just side. They just take that side. Yeah. But that's the propaganda that Black Lives Matter puts out. They don't put out too much information these days, too many press releases these days, probably because of all their scandals, their changes of leadership, and less people trusting them with their money, their hard-earned money these days. But yet, speaking of propaganda, there's things like this that have made their rounds on social media. I saw this and saved this from just the other day. So this guy, he's a journalist, self-proclaimed investigative journalist, Soliman Ahmed, who I frequently find in Twitter Spaces or X Spaces. And this is something that he put out. Breaking. Israel bombs and destroys the largest church in Palestine. Israel has bombed the Greek Orthodox Church of St. Porphyrius. Sorry if I'm saying that incorrectly. In Gaza. A church in Gaza. The church is the third oldest Christian temple in the world. The irony lies in Christian Zionists supporting the destruction of their own churches. However, The church posted on Facebook that this rumor is completely false. So the church, which we were told had been destroyed, said that that was not the case. So he did correct himself later on, but not after putting out all this propaganda. He added here, the church before it was destroyed. Notice how he didn't show you what it looked like after it was destroyed. He just said that it was destroyed in bold letters. Yeah, beautiful church, regardless of what religion you are. And it still is, because it did not get destroyed. Not to say no mosque or anything like that has been destroyed, but this completely false. And the clarification is here. And at least he did clarify later on, but not after the initial propaganda spread. He said, the church confirmed it has remained untouched, and they are taking in Palestinian refugees who need help. But notice how people on the right aren't like calling for his silencing. No, the silencing of individuals who spread propaganda like this. It's the people who believe what he believes. Not just religiously, but in times like these. Whether it's over Black Lives Mattering or, I guess, Palestinian lives mattering. Not that the two things are the same at all. It's just that, things all get lumped in together sometimes, clearly. The people who support all of those groups, they're the ones who want to silence, what they call disinformation or misinformation. Just not when it's coming from individuals who agree with them. But yes, sorry, my cat is like stabbing his claws into my leg, demanding to be let into my lap. Dear beloved in Christ, we would like to inform you that St. Porphyrius Church in Gaza is untouched and operating in service of the community, and so on and so forth. I imagine that tweet is still up on his timeline, as is the initial one, which was completely false. A lot of false narratives. It's hard to know what to think sometimes because everyone has an opinion and they so often contradict each other from one person to the next, or even in one person. But let me go back to this for a moment, just because I have a couple of articles pulled up. I have to wrap this up shortly, but let me clear a couple more tabs. Iran identifies 5 prisoners it wants from U.S. in swap for Iranian Americans and billions in assets. So yes, $6 billion to be exact. And now, when asked if our government will refreeze that money, since they keep saying, oh, we can refreeze it anytime we want, they keep refusing to say that they will. Okay, so you want to say, oh, $0 of the $6 billion have been used to contribute to this terrorist attack carried out by Hamas on Israel. Okay, but money is fungible. And you've said that if they don't show their best interests, or your best interests, I suppose, then you can refreeze that money. And then when you're asked, well, since that's exactly what they're doing, they're failing to do their part here. And in fact, they are participating, regardless of how directly, in terrorism. Shouldn't you go ahead and refreeze that money? Along with increasing sanctions, which have been loosened in other areas, notably in areas of oil. You just say, well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. So yeah, you're green lighting terrible things. And then when they happen, you gaslight us all and claim that you didn't greenlight anything. Seems to happen time and time again. Here are the individuals sought by the Iranians. And you will notice that the individuals we give up typically have a lot more suspicious pasts than the individuals we get back in return. And you can go through the list here on ABC News and also here on Al Jazeera, where you learn about the 5 individuals, or at least 3 of the individuals we received. Only 3 of them have been made known even at this point. This is in that prisoner swap. And you'll just see that, just as in the case of the Brittany Griner prisoner swap, which left other Americans in Russia even to this day, because Brittany Griner was more important than all of them, apparently, even though she's like a basketball player, right? I love basketball as much as anyone, maybe more. But, it seemed like because she checked certain boxes, she was a black lesbian woman, as soon as she was apprehended, everything was about getting her home. Didn't hear too much about the other guys. In fact, you didn't hear anything about them until you heard about her. Then you heard about them only because you were hearing about her. And then when she was brought home and they remained, you quit hearing about them. And anytime anyone in the press corps asks Karine Jean-Pierre about whether any progress has been made in bringing those individuals home, those white males home, the answer is, well, I don't have anything to read out on that. We've been doing everything we can. Okay. But it was supposed to be like America's Christmas present when Brittany Griner was brought home, even though, through her own foolishness, she got caught with illegal drugs over there in Russia at a time when she should have known better. So I'm not trying to tie all these things together too much. It just seems to me like our priorities are in the wrong place. Priorities are in pandering, climate change. That's another narrative Biden administration puts out there, that our number one threat in this country is climate change. And then we have things like this, terrorism knocking on the door, either on the door of our closest allies or literally on our door, the door of our southern border. But you can go through this list here on AlJazeera.com, and you can see more details about the U.S.-Iran prisoner swap. The United States and Iran are freeing 5 prisoners, each under an agreement that also involves the transfer of $6 billion of frozen Iranian assets from South Korea. But see if you can get a promise from them to refreeze that money now that it appears that they have participated in one way or another in the attack on Israel. And I would encourage you, if you want a Jewish perspective, go and listen to Ben Shapiro's podcasts. I believe it was yesterday. I want to say it was yesterday. He very passionately played it out. And he played the clips, many of which I have seen myself, the horrendous things that are happening, that have happened over in Israel. And yes, have happened, but are still happening, since there are Israelis, there are Americans still being held hostage. And what do? Do you go in and continue to wipe out Hamas, knowing that your own might be wiped out in the process? Is it for the greater good at this point? All is fair in love and war, they say, some say. At what point does that mentality run out? I don't need to tell you the basics about Hamas, but yes, Palestinian militia group, founded in the 80s, actually. And they rule the Gaza Strip, which has sworn, the militia group, the militant group, has sworn to the destruction of Israel. Yeah, and like I said, members of our own government are in favor of that. Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, most notably. But yes, they took power in 2007, and Katie barred the door ever since. So, is this going to be the end for them? Or are there going to be cells popping up elsewhere? Are we going to see Hezbollah get more involved? Here's this also from Al Jazeera. Israel-Hamas war updates. Israeli bombing rocks Gaza through the night. They bombed more than 200 locations. And in case I didn't say it already, like, they could have done this from day one, and they didn't because they don't want to kill innocent people. On the other hand, Hamas has been trying to do this since day one, but they cannot because of the Iron Dome, which we Americans are funding, fortunately, which is blocking inbound missiles left and right. I don't know if this has any footage of the blocking of inbound missiles, but there is some footage here, as you can see, that has been going on for days at this point. That's what it looks like on the ground. And so on the one hand, you have this. You have the casualties, the fatalities, even of children over in the Gaza Strip. And it's horrible. But I'm not going to make a false equivalence. I'm not. I'm not the one celebrating here. Israel is not the one celebrating here. They want this to end. They didn't want it to begin in the first place. They tried to manage it. And this is what happens when you try to manage terrorists. They ultimately try to take over. No rhyme or reason. Clearly it wasn't for their own benefit, since now they're just likely going to get eradicated, at least to a certain extent, along with everyone they proclaim to care about while using them as human shields. They set up their shops in schools, hospitals, you name it. But the anti-Semitic individuals in Congress and beyond, well, they want to spin the narrative. They want to pretend that Israel does, I suppose, need to be abolished. That's what they, I guess, think. That's not what I think. They want to wipe Jews off the face of the earth at the behest of radical Islamists whose ideology in its nature is radical. A lot of things are radical. Heck, I'd say Christianity is radical to a certain extent. Every fundamental belief in this life is going to be somewhat radical. But if it leads you to the celebration of the destruction of individuals based solely upon religion and cultural differences, well, you might just very well be a terrorist. Israel says it has regained full control of Gaza fence. I know they've shut off water and certain supplies, electrical as well, into Gaza. Israel to inform 100 families their loved ones are hostages. Not to get all my news from Al Jazeera, but that's just a headline I saw. There's from The Guardian. Netanyahu says Israel's siege just getting started. That's not particularly new news. I mean, this has been going on. Here's another clip for you. That's the mosque there. I referred to it earlier. What can you do? How do you prevent it? Once it's happened, how do you stop it? And once you've stopped it, how do you keep it from happening again and again and again and again? Iron Dome can only mitigate so much, especially if there are failures of intelligence, which may or may not have occurred. I imagine since it was on the Sabbath and a holiday as well, people were even less prepared than usual, but I guess that's when they should be more prepared than ever. I think there were, in addition to, land, sea, and air, people paragliding in, militia paragliding in across the border there. If you want to call it a border. Well, there was a cyber attack that shut down portions of the border, like 80 sections, allowing approximately 1,000 terrorists through. And they went door to door, including through a music festival where they killed well over 200 individuals. They filmed some of it. They put some of it online as though it makes them look, more morally superior in the eyes of the rest of the world. Well, in the eyes of some, yes. Not in the eyes of anyone with insight. More headlines here. Graphic videos of Hamas attacks spread on X. This is a article from Politico. Beheadings, mass shootings, and other images linked to the violence targeting Israel widely shared on Elon Musk's social media network. I don't know if this is going to be critical of Elon Musk or what the point of this is, but it's true. There's a lot of stuff making its rounds. And as Ben Shapiro said, look at it. You need to see it. You need to understand the state of the world you live in. Israel imposes total siege on Gaza after Hamas surprise attack. Of course, it was the inevitable. It's the inevitable. So don't blame them. We can find a reason to blame anyone we want to blame, but at the end of the day, you're either a terrorist or you're not. That's what I have to say about that for now. I got to go back to work. I don't know what you think in the comments below. Feel free to disagree with me on anything I said. I'm no expert on anything, but I've just been watching and listening and learning a lot. There were some press conferences featuring family members of individuals who have either been killed or held hostage. Israelis or Americans, both have spoken to the communication or lack thereof with the Biden administration, with the government under Netanyahu. They've complained to a certain extent about lack of communication, and they've said, do whatever it takes. They've said, like I'm saying, we're not experts, we're not military experts here, so we can't tell you what to do, but do whatever you got to do to bring this to an end, to bring Hamas to an end. And what other option is there at this point? You got to limit the death toll as much as possible. But yeah, it's a mess. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Keep in touch. Keep in tune. New content is coming soon. Peace.